Well, hello everyone, welcome back. It's Nicola Cairncross. The last time you saw me on this channel was in 2016 when my sister and I departed for Greece in an attempt to get over Steve's sudden death in March 2016. And basically we sold everything. We went over to stay in a friend's house in Greece, and I was there on and off for the next 3 years, and it worked wonderfully. And I came back in 2019 in September because basically I had had a really difficult 8 weeks without any internet. And you never feel so vulnerable in a foreign country as when you can't speak to your loved ones or do your work or get on with things now. And basically it was all in the name of my person whose house I was renting at the time. And so the Greek telephone system, you only have one English speaker there, and they're only there in certain hours. So every time I'd ring, if I'd like get through, it would ring and ring and ring and ring. You'd have to sit there for hours in the boiling heat. And you couldn't go down the beach, you couldn't go down the shop, you were in your house, you had to have the air conditioning on because it was so hot. I love the heat, don't get me wrong, but when you're trying to do something stressful, it just adds to the issues, really. And so then when the English speaking person finally picked up the phone and you got to speak to them, they would always then say they'd contact you, but they'd contact the person who owned the house, not me, and they'd do it in Greek. So it was really difficult. And my friend said to me, well, you had a whole team, didn't you? I mean, didn't you have a whole team of virtual workers? And I said, yeah, I did actually. I had a VA and I had a social media manager and everything. He said, so why didn't you just hire a Greek person to help you with this? And the weird thing was, it hadn't even occurred to me. I know, that's bonkers, isn't it? I'd asked a couple of the Greek language teachers if they could help me, but, they were sort of not very keen. And I offered them money, but they still weren't that keen. I don't know why. Anyway, the point was that it was quite a lot more difficult to get it sorted. And finally, it did get sorted, but it sort of left me feeling really sort of discombobulated, if you like. It was really weird because I'd have to go down to the taverna or there's lots of tavernas with Wi-Fi, and I'd go down to my favourite one and I'd do a bit of work and then I'd pack my laptop away and I'd go on the beach all day. And then the thing was, when I went home, I couldn't watch TV, I couldn't communicate with my kids by Zoom or by, WhatsApp or whatever it's called. And it just made me feel really isolated and really vulnerable. So then my daughter came over in late September and we had a week together that was great, and she told me that her dad was moving out of the flat that they'd been living in for 10 years, and he was going up to live with his girlfriend finally and officially. And I thought, this is a good opportunity for me to go home. And so in September 2019 I went home to England, and I had just secured myself a really big contract working for an international bank doing all their social media. So things were really good. And of course, we all know what happened next, don't we? My sister came back from singing in China in November with a rather bad cough. But let's not go into that right now. But the point is that ever since then, my life's been on hold, apart from 2022. When I went off to Greece for 3 months, and then I went over to the Dominican Republic to speak at an event, and then I went on to El Salvador, and then Mexico, actually. And I didn't really get on with El Salvador because I got there and my taxi driver took me to my Airbnb and I couldn't get into my Airbnb. And I was a bit jumpy about where being in a strange country. I always get really nervous when I go to a new place until I settle down. But I went there and the airport was fabulous. And I finally, the taxi driver took me to another place and I stayed there for a couple of days, and it wasn't very nice, but they were quite nice people. So then I went to a hotel and I thought, no, this is ridiculous. Let's just go on to Mexico, because I really was looking for somewhere else to live. Because I decided after what had happened in 2020, 2021, 2022, early 22, that I didn't want to be in England anymore. I was terrified of them locking us down again. I was terrified of the tyrannical regime that was creeping over everything, and I wanted to go and live somewhere else. So I went to Mexico because everyone who goes to Mexico says it's wonderful, and my son had just come back from Mexico and he told me some nice places to go. And I arrived in Mexico, and the first thing I did was leave my phone in the back of a taxi. And I arrived at the hotel to find I didn't like the hotel. My phone was gone, my cards were gone. it was just it was another nightmare basically. So I went to the airport and I spoke to the taxi people there, and they were incredibly helpful, and they rang the guy who had taken me to the hotel, and he had my phone, which was wonderful. And I had to pay him some money, but he came and delivered it back on his night off, which was really cool. And then he took me to one of the nicest hotels in the area, because the hotel I'd booked and paid for a week was, it looked all right from the outside, but the woman running it was not very nice at all, and she didn't speak any English, or she didn't want to. And it was just not the kind of place I'd want to stay, really. Anyway, so I stayed in this other hotel for about 3 or 4 days, and it was really very nice, but I sort of had the stuffing knocked out of me by then. So I went back home again, and I stayed in a luxury Airbnb glamping place. It was in the stables in Worthing, just north on the downs. It was wonderful. And I was looking for a flat, and I bought a car because I'd sold everything when I went to Greece previously. And when I was living at Phoebe and Nelson's, I didn't really get anything sort of, I didn't need a car, and I didn't need any furniture, and so I didn't really have anything. So I went back to England, and I've found this flat that I'm in now. And it's a wonderful, wonderful flat. My sister Sarah, who you met in the previous videos, helped me find the flat. And it's a wonderful flat, and it looks out over the river, and it's absolutely beautiful. And it's just off the high street in Shoreham, so it's really very convenient. And I stayed here for a while on my own, and then Sarah came in between house sits, and then my daughter came and stayed for a while when she left her partner and moved on. And then I've got my son staying with me right now. But I had a very interesting conversation with my daughter yesterday, which made me think that I wanted to start this podcast up again. And it's called Swagger and Soul. And I called it that originally because I wanted to live with more swagger and soul after Steve died. I wanted to get my life going again. And I sort of feel like I just about get it going again, and then something knocks it back. And I've been watching a lot of other over 50 podcasters on YouTube, and I'm wondering if I started a podcast that was nothing to do with business, nothing to do with work, and just was about my quest to live my life with more swagger and soul, if it would force me to go out and try things. Because if I had you guys to report to and encouragement perhaps from you, then perhaps I might force myself to go and do things. It might even if it was going out for a walk, because I really hardly ever go out at all. I don't know what it is. It was the same when I lived in Brighton during lockdown. I just didn't want to go out at all. I think it felt like in 2020 that everything that I knew about the world fell away, and everything was uncovered. And if you know what I'm talking about, you'll know what I'm talking about. It's like a grieving process for the world you once knew. So I'd been through 3 years of grieving for Steve, and then I came back to England and everything else. I started a grieving process for the world I once knew. And I'm finding it pretty tough to get through that, I've got to say. It's hard when you know that there's evil, unspeakable evil out there in the world, and that people are doing terrible things to each other and to children, and that you're a bit helpless to do anything about it. And especially when you get a bit older, you just don't know, what you can do. So what I have been doing, and this is why I thought it'd be interesting to start this podcast again today, is I've been helping a friend of mine called Matthew, who is a really thoroughly decent bloke, and he's he's a candidate for Penrith and Solway for Reform UK. Now, my best friend Andy says that none of the solutions from this is going to come from politics, and I do tend to agree with him. But Matthew's a good bloke, and he's needed help with his social media, so I've been doing his social media for him, and it's going incredibly well. He's in a safe Tory seat, but his polling is increasing dramatically. I think he's at 21%, and I think the Conservative candidate's at 23%, and the Conservative candidate isn't turning up to anything. So it's quite, Matthew's out and about all the time, and he's doing some fantastic videos, and he's talking about everything that I ask him about. So I'm getting to find out all about how Reform UK works. And every time I ask my Matthew a question about what their policy is on something, he makes a video. So it makes it incredibly easy to do his social media, and he's doing really well. He's a very likable chap. Go and have a look. Just put in Penrith and Solway Reform UK, and you can find him easy enough. His name's Matthew Moody. So I'm doing a little bit about trying to help. And this really is the last ditch attempt for politics. I'm not going to get involved in politics at all after this, if something dramatic doesn't change. So in 4 days' time, either Reform will get a load of seats and they'll be the opposition, and Labour will take charge. And that is the most utterly frightening proposition I've ever come across, because it will be worse than the Tories. They would have locked us down harder. They would have locked us down longer. They would have mandated vaccines, and they would have... They want 15-minute cities. They don't want anyone travelling, and they want us all eating bugs. My sister knows about this stuff, but none of the rest of my family want to know. I had a really interesting conversation with my daughter yesterday, where we sort of skirting around the subject, because she knows enough. And I think the youngsters do know more than they let on, because they're exposed to Instagram and TikTok. And a lot of political stuff goes across their timeline in sound bites. And I think a lot of what people used to call conspiracy theories, which have been proven to be conspiracy facts, that goes past their timelines in 60-second bites as well. So I think they can't help but be exposed to it. But Phoebe, my daughter, says that I choose not to look at it because she finds it hard enough gets anxious enough about normal life as it is, although she comes across as incredibly confident like I do. She's quite a sensitive little soul, really. And she's just started a new job, so she doesn't want to be worried about anything. And I totally understand that. So we are sort of on the same page, but sort of not. And I'm not allowed to talk about anything to any of the family, apart from the one sister who's on the same page. So I do feel quite lonely sometimes. I've got a lot of great business mates, but they don't live too very close. And we don't really see each other except when we really make an effort to get together. So I thought it'd be nice to start a podcast on YouTube, because I do better on video than audio. Just audio is a bit dull. And see if I can gather together a group of like-minded over 50 people who are in the same position as me, perhaps empty nesters, perhaps widowers, and who are trying to make sense of the world. Because I need to figure out what I'm going to do with the rest of my life. That's why this episode is called The Rest of My Life. I've got to figure out how to live with more swagger and soul. I've got to figure out how to make myself go out more, how to enjoy life in spite of what's going on, especially if we get the Labour result everyone's predicting. Or do I go and live abroad again? Do I go and work and live abroad? Apparently, Bukele, the president of El Salvador, is going to be giving away 5,000 passports soon to people who can bring in skills and experience and help El Salvador become the world leading country it's starting to look like it could become. I quite fancy that, but even though I didn't have such a great time there last time, it wasn't their fault. It was the Airbnb owner who didn't leave the key where they said they were going to. So yeah, there's a lot of things I could do, but all I tend to do is sit and watch TV and watch Portuguese homesteaders doing up their properties. And I want more from my life than that, but I'm finding it hard to push myself to do it. So anyway, that's me. That's the end of my ramblings for this time. Thank you if you've watched or listened to me. Love to see some comments down below. Are you in the same position I'm in? Do you have friends who don't get you or don't understand you or aren't on the same page politically? Do you have family that don't want to know because they would rather, hear no evil, see no evil kind of thing? Do you know what's going on in the world and you're finding it hard to handle as well? And let's just talk. I'm just going to try this for a few weeks and see what happens. And if I get any response, if I get any encouragement, then I'll carry on. And thank you very much for spending some time with me.